us. Their team is here. We may have some people online as well, and they're going to be doing a presentation for us today at the meeting. I'll also have people, when you come up, introduce themselves, and maybe some people online that we have introduce themselves as well. Just reviewing the agenda, the committee members, we're going to have committee member reports. We're going to talk about the designer selection panel and what happened on the 21st. LaValle Brensinger Architects is going to do a presentation for us. We're going to vote, hopefully, to recommend LVA as our designer of choice for this project. We will talk about, maybe briefly, about our project website and approve meeting minutes, formal meeting minutes, and talk about future agendas.
Finder hasn't added support for that with Siri.
So, does anybody have, we're having committee member reports are probably gonna be more relevant later on as we go, but if there's something that you learned, or if there's some MSBA training you went to, or something that you wanna share with the committee, now's a good time to do that. Does anybody have?
No reports from me.
No?
I could just add in that I got a chance to sit with Senator Lewis at the senior Thanksgiving dinner in North Reading, and he made a point to bring out the fact that he is aware that this is a very important project for us, and noted that Winchester is getting a reimbursement rate of about 20%, and he expected that with the new formulas we might be looking at 40%, and that didn't include any additional reimbursements we might get from the Inflation Reduction Act, and potentially for those bonus points, but
I hope we're getting more than 20%.
it's gonna be worse, yes.
Tell Senator Lewis he needs to start moving.
40, I said 40, correct?
Oh, okay,
Winchester is getting 20.
okay,
We might be getting double that
Yeah.
out of the gate
all right.
because they've made changes to the reimbursement formula.
Their cost per square foot went up, so,
Yeah.
which is good news for us.
Yes.
Okay, we'll move on to the MSB Designer Selection Panel. We met with the members of the MSBA, with our town manager, Fidel, and Dr. Milczewski, and myself. We had a meeting on the 21st. We had a meeting on the 7th, and entertained, we were shortlisting some of our firms that gave bids to us. There were 4 in total. We were very appreciative of them. We came up with a short list on the November 21st. We met and we had 3 half-hour presentations from LBA, from Feingold Alexander, and from Studio G. 3 really very highly competent, excellent companies. LBA came out as the vote getter, number 1 vote getter. We rank them, and you're allowed to give 3 points to your first placed firm, 2 to the second, and 1 to the third. So it's a little bit of a nerve-wracking process. I'm sure for us, the first time going through it, very nerve-wracking. For you guys, I'm sure doubly nerve-wracking. But I know that after your presentation, I was excited, and I know other members on the panel said the same thing. I know some of you were there.
Yep.
Presented. Feel free to make any comments. So it was a good process. So anybody else have any? Our OPMs were there. It was
No, I think it was overall, it was a very good process. I think the MSBA provided their input, but they also heard input from the district, and I think the 3 of you spoke very highly, very well, and really made the case for strengths and weaknesses on all parts. And I think it was a good process overall.
They have the MSBA definitely in Massachusetts has a really good process that they follow. So we can move along to the presentation.
Oh, that was fast.
Well, we don't want to slow you down. My name's Lee Sherwood, the principal.
We need you to
Yes.
be at the podium, Lee. Sorry.
So I go up there?
Yes, sir.
Okay, we'll do it like that.
And Jackie will share the presentation.
Lee, would you like us to introduce ourselves as well? So
We'd love to meet you all.
Yeah.
Let me start.
Sure.
Nancy Toomey. I'm also a member of the Permanent Building Committee, which is here in Reading. I'm an architect, but
Okay.
mostly residential, so, yeah, hey.
I'm John Coode, also a member of the Permanent Building Committee. I'm well retired, but I was a structural and civil engineer when I was gainfully employed, so.
Well, you don't lose that.
Maybe not, yeah.
Hi, I'm Kirk McCormick, also a member of the Permanent Building Committee, and I am an attorney who practices construction law.
Okay.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
I'm Carla Nazaro. I am a resident as well, and I am I'm the school committee representative and the chair of the committee.
Karen Gately Herrick, vice chair of this committee and select board member.
Ed Ross, I am the member from the Finance Committee.
Greg Stepler, I'm a member of the Permanent Building Committee, do
Okay.
commercial construction.
Oh, good.
And-
Um,
And we do have, I know we have our superintendent, Tom Milichewski online. It looks like we have Sharon Engstrom. I don't know if we have anybody else on there. These are the plus two other people. Pat Tompkins is another permanent building committee, you know Pat, member, and Sarah McLaughlin's another school committee rep who aren't able to be here. These are the voting members on this committee, and then obviously we have other people who input to our committee as well. Our
Okay.
head of facilities, Joe Huggins, Jane Wellman, our procurement person, our town manager, our superintendent. We have they're not part of our exact committee, but we do have our Reading Municipal Light Department representatives here as well. And we have our principal for our schools, and we have another educational rep, a teacher that's also on part of our committee as well.
Well, we're gonna need all of them. It seems like a very diverse group, which is always good. And I did speak with Pat Tompkins in Swampscott just the other day, who was building that building, so. With me today is David Harris, who is our PM as we get into the more technical aspects a little later on. Right now, he'll be behind the scenes a little more. He's actually putting the finishing touches on Swampscott as it's being built. And we can't see it on the screen, but Jenny Kadeyamaki is on the screen. She's zooming in and watching us. Hi, Jenny. I don't know how this works. It worked. Yes, we can. Thank you. So Jenny had a cold and wanted to do it from a distance so that we didn't get everybody sick. And Jenny is our project manager, and you'll be seeing a lot of myself and Jenny. And Scott Reynolds came today, and he's our project designer. So a lot of the design and work that you already saw, he worked on. I just wanted to really come in force and meet you in real life in person.
Appreciate it, it's great, thank you.
And by the way, we've just met, but I've worked with Mike before.
Awesome.
So that is our core team. And so the way I'm going to do this is I'm going to just kind of say, when we showed this to the MSBA, it was 30 minutes, and if you've done those kinds of things, it's wham, bam, 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 and it's very formal and every word matters. Here, what I would like to tell you is what we meant by each slide. So it's a little more like, why are we doing this? And the truth is that we also, one of the reasons we thought we were a good fit is we have a lot of experts in our office. We have a pretty large office, educational experts and interiors and things like that. But we also had our landscape architect, our educational planner, Mike Parolo, our energy consultant did a whole piece, which David's actually just going to take today. We knew how much energy and sustainability meant to this community, and we've been doing net zero design, so we wanted to express that to you. And then even our MEP engineer was here. So we tried to get the whole balance of the technical and all of that. Next. Who is advancing?
Jackie's advancing. Yep. You can just say, next slide, please.
Next slide, please. That's what I'm saying. Next-
You can follow
She's working on
instructions,
it.
that's great.
She's working on it.
See the mouse.
There we go.
So Jenny's gonna present from Zoom the first few slides.
Yeah. Thanks, Lee.
Yeah, so I just showed a few slides about what we learned about Reading, and this slide was about I hopped on the commuter rail to take a field trip up to visit you guys. And one of the things that I just loved about the community was the all the wonderful little independent bookstores, and I really got a sense of a town with a really strong sense of community and all these wonderful community organizations, and yeah, just a really a great town to live in and a great town to work with. Next slide, please. And then I shared a little bit about the process that we will go through in engaging with the community. So we know that building support for a project like this and for the vote is very important. And the way that we build support is that we get to know you. And the way that we get to know you is that we talk to you and we listen and understand and we incorporate the things that we hear. And then we share back to the community how we've incorporated those things. So we're bringing everyone along on the journey, on the process of designing the school so that everyone has a sense of ownership. Next slide, please. And this is just talking about some of the tools that we use to engage with the community. So we love to meet with people in person. I say as I talk into the screen. But we have also learned how to use all these other wonderful tools that enable us to communicate. And we know that lots of people have families. I have 2 young kids, and it is hard to get out of the house in the evening. So by using all these different kinds of tools, we make it possible for more people to participate in the process and hopefully to have buy-in of the solution. So we think that's great, and we will use all of the available tools to meet people where they are. Next slide, please. And then Mike Parolo, our educational planner, shared a little bit about his educational visioning process, which I'm so excited to participate in. And this slide was about just the different members of the school community and the district community that will participate in that process, from students, district leadership, to teachers and administrators. Next. And Mike's process is interesting because he really starts with developing an understanding of who the learner is. How is teaching and learning happening in your schools now, and how do you want it to be happening in the future? Next slide, please. And then from that understanding of the teaching and the learning, that then is the launch pad to start to talk about the spaces in the new school and how the spaces can better support the teaching and learning that you want to be doing. Next slide. And then we just shared a little bit about what we learned about Killam Public Schools, Reading Public Schools, I apologize, about the pre-kindergarten program that you have in town, and some of the things that we learned about you in the strategic plan, the importance of a sense of belonging. And this is just a starting point, and we, look forward to really getting to know your schools and your town. Next slide.
Someone else actually talked about these slides, but let me just say that one of the things that happens a lot of times, we do educational visioning, and it almost seems philosophical at times, where you have a lot of words, a lot of promises, a lot of guidelines and all that kind of stuff. And then the architect, I have seen this, where Mike Parola would do his work and we're there, but then all of a sudden the architect starts doing programming and making a building. That transition is important because if there's a break right there, then all of those amazing things that we learned about you and the things that are appropriate don't happen. So one of the things that we really work on is taking all those things we learned and really putting it into our buildings. One of the things we did here was just talk about the kinds of concepts that end up in a school, even in elementary school. They may be things you're aware of, but you probably haven't built an elementary school in a long time. So for example, the concept of making a place that's really safe, but welcoming and inviting and to scale, and a place where everybody kind of wants to go and feels like this is my home, you know? That's really an important concept. Next. So we're really actually showing you architecture here just for a second. And spaces are different now. I mean, there's not just a lot of classrooms, cells and bells, as they used to call them, but the idea now is that there's clusters of groups and teaching, and there's experiential and experimental spaces, really flex spaces where people do different kinds of learning in different groups for different individual students. Next. And if there is, I'm sure somebody here used to teach, maybe, but if there's a teacher here, they'd say we need flexibility. We also want a sink and lots of storage, but they need flexibility. In order to make a really successful school these days, every classroom wants to be super flexible so they can do any kind of configuration. When somebody from special education comes in, they want to be able to go in the corner. And it's not about necessarily having things that flip and open and close, and they need space. And they need us not to build something right in the middle of it that you can't move, if that makes any sense. That's a good classroom. Thank you. Next. I like this picture because it shows all of these young children learning and sitting and doing the things that they are comfortable doing. So when people talk about individual learning, when you say, you know, every student matters, you know, and we want to design a curriculum, your teachers are trying so hard to make a curriculum that works for all these different kids with all these different needs and abilities. This is just a picture that talks about how that kid's in the window and that's how they're comfortable, and that kid's there, and that terrible posture, but whatever. They're kids. Next. And we like to say, don't forget joy, excitement, and fun in an elementary school especially. We're trying to make a place that's not only inviting, but a place where they want to go to school, a place where the teachers want to go to school and the families want to be there and all of that. And we never want to really lose that energy. Next. We had our Jade from Terra Inc., who's our landscape architect there. And we've worked with her before, and she's very creative and inventive. You have a really tight site. Every square inch is going to be, how do we make this play area? How do we make this adaptively play area for different kids? How do we do that within your budget and make it really safe and connected? Next. And then we'll have a real focus, especially with Jade, on children learning from nature-based areas. I know you don't have you might have woods nearby, but we can create the sense of learning outside. With COVID, kids went outside more. They probably should have been outside anyway. That's how I learned. I went out in the woods and got in trouble. Next. And we also had a little piece here because you asked how can we maximize value? And I guess the thing that I had said was value is not just about money. It is about money, but it's not just money. It's really a balance of all the things like safety and education and community use and all these different things, and finding that perfect place. And that's real value to me. And we talked a little bit about Swampscott, and I know that some of you know about that project. And the reason we talked about it was successful. It was a very difficult community because they had voted down at school. I don't like to say it, but they really were suffering from some sort of post-traumatic distress because they weren't sure how to move forward. We met with the community over 20 times during just the feasibility study, just to listen and really understand and try to gain trust, which is what we're trying to do. But it was also the site that was actually chosen was a very small site because they almost have no land in that small place. So we learned a lot of things about dealing with a small site and making it safe and functional and getting the most from that. COVID, the budget for Swampscott was developed before COVID happened, so we get this fixed budget. COVID happened, everything went through the roof, and a lot of things have not come back down. There's been a kind of a cost. We did not go away. We value managed with all of our consultants, and we brought it in on budget at the end. And we did so without cutting things, but more like changing things and looking at priorities. I want to say it that way. It's very important. Next. So I love this because the first thing we did was we're going to do this with you. We met with your people from the community and we asked them what their priorities are. See those bubbles up there? They're kind of proportional. So this many people said sustainable and energy. This many people said safety and security, that kind of thing. And after meeting with the community, we're able to put together these, what we would call pillars for them. You can come up with a creative name for yourself. Reading's Rights. And it was education and sight and traffic because in Swampscott's traffic is just everything. And then sustainability and community. You'll have your own. Next. And then we want you to know that as we work with you through this process, you will see a lot of options and we will evaluate them and we will show them to you, but we'll also analyze them. We'll also show them to the community and we'll understand what is the most appropriate and what fits you. So this is just an example to show how we do get input. I don't mind getting input from everybody. I don't take it personally. I look at it like sometimes we learn the very best thing from the neighbor across the street who's lived there for 30 years. Maybe they know more about the site than I do. Next. And then lastly, we put it all together and we want to make your decision really easy. See how those top things are those pillars again? So guess what? Your criteria for success is actually judging them against those same pillars that are important to you. Your priorities never go away. And then we go across and we grade them with you. And if in the end, we want your decision to both reflect the community, but be easy. So that everybody can say, well, that's a no-brainer. That's what we should do. Next. I think that David's going to speak for a couple minutes for you guys.
Okay, so as Lee mentioned, we know sustainability is crucial to the town. It's important for most communities these days, just in terms of being practical, treating the earth well, and also, budgets are always going up, let's face it. So it's crucial that we get this right. But that mission really lines up with what we do on a regular basis. Our K-12 studio it's baked into our process, from day one. And we have demonstrated projects that have achieved LEED certification. We have some passive house projects for different scale projects. And we do have some extensive net zero experience as well working with our consultants. So we're very confident that our skill set really mates up very well with your objective for that. Next, please. So the path to net zero, it's somewhat of a formula that we've developed with our consultants, where we go through a pretty logical linear process. We'll take a look at the ultimate EY goal and what that means, and we can help you, establish what that number wants to be. And we start looking at the envelope as the primary exterior design feature, which is really going to help you manage the loads that are required for heating and cooling. First off, we reduce loads from smart lighting, all the sort of smart building technology like occupancy sensors, sophisticated building management systems, And of course, the HVAC system is always a crucial decision point in any project. So we'll look at all kinds of different system options in order to get to that UI goal, of course, while balancing that with budget and costs. And then lastly, occupant engagement, we get down to that sort of user level where we make those controls very intuitive and built in, and even get down to the level of, individual pieces of equipment in the building in terms of copiers. Kitchen equipment these days is typically all electric, for example, to maximize that efficiency. So we get to that point, and then we can look at adding renewable energy to really get you down to that true net zero effect. And that's typically through photovoltaics, often on site, usually on site, but there are other ways we can do it. And that gets you to a net zero goal. Next, please. Is Vamshi Gouget with Thornton Tomasetti. This was his slide from the presentation. But again, it's not just all about therms and electrons. We also have to look at costs and make sure that the options we're looking at line up well with first cost considerations, as well as sort of life cycle analysis for long-term operations and maintenance concerns. So we'll look at all of those different options. Again, the envelope, the levels of insulation, how we get to those levels of insulation. Durability, of course, is always a factor with cladding. And we put that all together and look at these options and try to maximize the value, as Lee noted. It's really about maximizing that value. Next, please. And Doug LaJoy, our mechanical engineer, discussed this slide. And this is again about looking at all those system options. We'll look at first costs. We'll consider what are the utilities, what's the maintenance exposure over the life of the system to really understand the total life cycle cost of that system. And there is a point of diminishing returns that we will assess and determine. So we're going as far as we need to go to get that balance, but being careful again for value, not going too far because your return on investment may not be as effective. And so we'll find that sweet spot when we select those systems. And in terms of complexity, again, I know that's a concern for all communities. Once we turn the building over to you, it has to be understandable, it has to be comprehensible. The staff needs to know how to run it. So we're very cognizant of that, and we integrate that into the documents. And we also have requirements for training of all the staff built right into the specifications, so that they get that training and that confidence, so they know how to run this building. Next, please. And we talked about rebates and incentives, indeed, the Massachusetts School Building Committee offers substantial, now increased 4% benefit for achieving the high performance green schools. We do that routinely on all of our MSBA projects. And we have the Inflation Reduction Act, which is a recent piece of legislation that's turning out to be very lucrative in its ability to provide some significant funds back to these projects. So we will, of course, proceed accordingly to try to maximize what we can get through the IRA. And we also have the benefit of Reading having its own municipal light department as well, that we will work with closely to see what kind of rebates and incentives they're offering. And again, just align those goals in terms of incentive and rebates.
They're here right now, we should get, no, I'm just joking.
You want to check right now?
I have a feeling that you have a very helpful group here.
Oh, definitely.
Absolutely.
That's going to be good for us.
Yes, so we look forward to working with the regional utility. Next, please. And lastly, again, it's so crucial to leverage this project as a model for the town. I think moving forward, as it's been noted, this is the first public facility in quite some time. So we want to really establish a great example to demonstrate what can be achieved. And hopefully Reading can sort of take that and hold on to that and use that as sort of a template for future public work. But we really want the students, the staff, and of course the general public to be able to really appreciate this building, understand how it got to where it is, what it's trying to achieve, and just, you know, that sort of stewardship. It's a real thing. When people become aware of their roles as stewards in our society, it can really create good things. And we want to make sure that that happens on a daily basis. Next, please. I'll turn it over to Scott.
So as Leah mentioned, I'm the project designer on the project, and as such, I would be involved through the entirety of the design process. And that's a process that we really stress working with you at each stage to really ensure that we're designing a building that not only promotes and supports the educational visioning that we develop, but in the end is really a Reading unique design that's really reflects you and the community. So that process really starts with a facilities assessment where we really analyze the spaces and components of your existing building, determine what can be salvaged and reused if anything. And then we create a series of initial schemes that react to that analysis and take into account the constraints and opportunities of your specific site. So I'm going to go through and describe these. I'll go through in depth because they're a little more hands-on and, in my biased opinion, probably the most fun part of the presentation. And it's organized as a 1-story scheme, 2-story scheme, and a 3-story scheme. Next slide, please. So it's important to note here too that these schemes aren't necessarily what we're proposing your final solution would be. They just illustrate the process that we would go through with you to, you know, analyze those. So up first is a 1-story scheme, and this actually takes an addition renovation approach where it takes advantage of the existing classrooming, which is in kind of purple right there, and would renovate that into a newer learning environment, but it would build new shared spaces and an integrated pre-K center on the rear. And what that does, I mean, obviously throughout this whole process, we're really prioritizing maintain occupancy of the school throughout the whole construction process. So we really want to spend a lot of time and truly understand and develop the phasing of the construction process to accommodate that. So a scheme like this can accommodate that because the new construction, as you'll note, is kind of restricted to the east portion of the site in the orange and pink there. So that allows the site to be subdivided and really you restrict construction to one side and then have safe public access on the other. And obviously the whole priority there is maintaining safe access for students and staff to the building, but also ensuring that the programs and curriculum are uninterrupted throughout that whole process. And that's true for all of these schemes, but it's particularly sensitive in an addition renovation approach like this because you're actually touching the existing building and you reusing some of those spaces. So although there's some efficiency in a renovation where you're actually, you know, again, using some of the existing building, a 1-story approach is kind of inefficient because it creates this larger sprawling footprint. And you see it really takes up a lot of the site and you're left with little space for developing student play, access to the site, things like that. So how can we kind of resolve some of those inefficiencies? One solution is to actually explore a 2-story scheme. So next slide, we can see what a 2-story scheme might look like on your site. And you'll note that in this scheme, the actually entirety of the new school, it's a little hard to see the dashed outline of your existing footprint there, but the new school occurs outside of that. So that really simplifies the construction process where phase 1 would essentially be building that whole new school, again, on a subdivided site with controlled access. But by doing that, you build the new school and then can move fully into the new school and then demolish the existing school. So there's this uninterrupted occupancy that goes on. In a scheme like this, you'll note that pink portion there actually configures the pre-K as an addition. And what's kind of exciting about that is it really gives you the flexibility to either build that pre-K center as part of that last phase of construction, or you can wait and do it down the road with the district. So I want to also note here that all of these schemes, you'll see incorporates this new access to the site and vehicular circulation on the southern portion there, and that spans between Charles Street and Haverhill Street. And we think that that's a critical component, because what that does is it adds this extensive on-site queuing where it provides a ton of space for drop-off to occur on-site, which is going to eliminate that backup of parked vehicles that currently happens on Charles Street with the current configuration. And that's something that will obviously ultimately benefit the surrounding neighborhood and improve their conditions.
If I may, of course. We have a great traffic consultant who helped us at Swampscott in a more congested area. She does models of the neighborhood, of queuing, of the number of cars per every 15 minutes, all that kind of stuff. And in the afternoon, when everybody shows up and parks on your streets, you may choose to continue to do that. But I remember driving up at 3 o'clock or so to the briefing, and it was fairly chaotic. It may not have been chaotic to you, you might be used to it, but we want to propose to you ways to maybe create a different sort of queuing approach. And she is our consultant to help you do that. She's very good.
And then in addition, like I said, there starts to be an efficiency in a two-story scheme as opposed to a one-story scheme, where you get a smaller footprint, which reserves more of that site space to be developed. But it also starts to have more sustainable design incorporated into it, where you'll see some solar-oriented classrooms, which take advantage of natural lighting, ultimately reducing load on mechanical systems, and benefiting the sustainable aspect of the project. But where we can really maximize that value on site and really get the most out of a sustainable value is in a three-story scheme, actually. So the next slide will show what a three-story scheme might look like. From a phasing standpoint, the three-story scheme is essentially identical to the two-story scheme, where it's completely out of the footprint of the existing school. So it's that simplified construct, occupy, demolish. And then this also shares the same sustainable principles of that two-story scheme with the solar-oriented classrooms. But by going to 3 stories, you really maximize that value on your site. You have the most amount of space available to develop safe student play, that outdoor learning environments that we had talked about. Again, the on-site queuing and safe drop-off. But an organization like this scheme also starts to benefit us in how it's actually laid out. This scheme centralizes the shared spaces, so like the gymnasium, cafeteria, library, between the academic wings. And in doing so, it essentially creates this educational equity between all the grades, where each grade has equal and kind of the same access to those shared spaces. So it's a way to incorporate, again, those principles we'd be developing in the educational programming process into the actual design of the building. Beyond that, the 3-story scheme, again, has all those same principles, but it creates an ease of construction, because there's more space during that construction. So there's easier logistics, lower construction costs. There's more space for geothermal well fields during that construction. So it's really beneficial overall. And of course, a taller 3-story scheme like this might be met with some concern from the community, just given its scale. But there are certain strategies that we can implement to alleviate those concerns, such as like stepping the massing along the perimeters and at the entries, which you see happening here. And then obviously placing younger students on that first level so they have less travel distance and things like that. But those are just the details that we'd be exploring with you as we develop and look at all these options, even ones we haven't obviously seen here today. Ultimately ensuring that whatever final design we land on is truly what's best for you. And that's exactly what we're excited to do. Next slide, please.
This is probably the end, pretty much. We took a shot at understanding who you might be by the things that we learned at the briefing and through all of your other places. We know that this building wants to be community focused. Part of getting everybody to support and vote for a school is to make sure that it is used by everybody, multi-generational, people with all different kinds of needs. And this is a community building, essentially. Educational equity is a really important term these days, and I have a feeling that it supports the one thing in your vision that we really, your educational vision or mission that we really latched onto, which was to create a place where everyone belongs. It's a beautiful sentence. Not easy to do, but it's a beautiful sentence. And I think that's something what we would like to do. Sustainable design is easily one of your most important aspects. And the building wants to be cost effective. I'm sure you all believe that. And we've identified obviously site logistics, as Scott was talking about, as being really important here. How do you build on such a 7-acre site? How do you build on such a small site so that Mike has the laid out space for the construction so they don't charge us a lot of money? One of the funny things is you don't even have a lot of room to drill geothermal wells while both buildings are there, and creating space and figuring out ways to do this kind of stuff, if that's where you go with it, it's going to be huge. And safety, safety, safety. So we just wanted, this is not necessarily you, but this is the kind of thing that we think is you. Next. And then lastly, we didn't show this at the presentation, but what we're doing right now, we did a proposal. We've gotten the contract mostly done. There's just an attachment that we have to do. We're signing up all our consultants. As you may know, there's like 29 consultants and we have a fee and we're trying to fit them all in there. And we know how to do that. Most of them we've worked with before, so they know the game. And we're starting to really focus on this overall schedule. This is kind of like your whole project. Is this your exact schedule? Probably not, but it might be close. This is based on what Mike gave us and what Colliers has put together and what you had in your RFS. But on the next slide, thank you. We really focus on the feasibility and schematic design schedule. This is what leads you up to that vote. And this is where our attention is already going. We're developing a detailed work plan because you're gonna wanna know, when do we have visioning? How do we set that up? When does programming happen? How do we get the people on the site? When do the consultants come and look at the existing building? These are all the things that we need to set up, and they kind of have to slide along with you. The way that we have learned to work it is, your committee is not supposed to do any work. We're supposed to do the work and show it to you, and you're supposed to say yes or no or change it. So what we do is we set up a thing where we do this work, and then when it's at a certain place, and probably a couple of you are on these different committees, you disperse, we come in and we show you, this was the visioning. And you say, oh, that's great. Here's the program, that was great. This is what the facility study showed us. This is what the communications work is gonna look like. And each one of your SBC meetings becomes focused on one of those things, but we have to do the work first, so it kind of follows itself like a little tail. And that's why I say, I don't know how often you're thinking of having these meetings. Typically, we see it every 2 weeks. I'm not trying to tell you you have to or not. Is that pretty typical at this stage?
Yeah, I think what we had talked about is that it's typically once a month, but there's certain peak periods where it's at twice a month, that type of thing.
Well, what'll happen is, in the beginning, when we have a lot of information going on, we may ask you to double it up a few times. Because we need to keep moving. You need to also push us in, so sometimes a month makes it so that we actually aren't moving fast enough. And you have to keep us moving. And we'll make it organized for you so you can do that. So we'll talk about those kinds of things. We'll talk about subgroups, like obviously you have educational leadership. There might be a couple people from here who are part of the visioning. Some of you may really want to be in that visioning process. It's very interesting. You learn a lot and you get to understand how the building goes. Part of the sustainability committees, you probably have town-centric sustainability committee, energy and things like that. You have people, you may have some people from the community who want to be part of that. And then communication committee, because we talked about how do we set up these, the websites and all of that. I bet you have a couple of people around who are pretty skilled at this sort of thing.
So we'll talk about that. Facility assessments, educational visioning, these are the things we're really focused on. When we meet again, I don't know when that is yet, we want to show, having gone over it with Colliers first, we want to show you what we're thinking in terms of the way this all works. The MSBA process is great, but it's also extremely rigorous and it's based on their schedule. So we have to hit their points and then think backwards and fill it in and make it work. We're kind of used to it now, but so we just want you not to waste any time so that at the end, let's face it, if this building gets built in 1 year, if it somehow slides to another year, it's gonna cost 5% more, which is millions of dollars. You don't need that. You need it to be efficient and on time, but still do the right work. And that's what we're here for. So, I hope that wasn't too long. We get a little long-winded.
That's great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any questions from the committee?
We don't mind questions, by the way.
Anyone online have any questions?
I have a quick question.
We all talk about net zero. And, you know, it's not cast in stone that we will go that direction, but that seems to be the trend these days. On the Permanent Building Committee, we've been talking a little bit about what is called embodied carbon. And embodied carbon, for those who are not familiar with the term, means the amount of carbon energy which is used in the production of a new building. As you probably are aware, the production of building materials, cement, steel, glass, aluminum, is very energy intensive. And the question that I have, and I think people generally will have in the future more than they are now, is how do we justify building new buildings if we have a net zero energy approach? It's much more efficient generally to renovate existing buildings than to build new. Would you, in your if we go net zero, would you in your net zero approach take the embodied carbon energy use for constructing the new building, plus the embodied energy carbon that has already been used in constructing the original building, which may be demolished, but needs to go on the ledger anyway, on the debit side? How would you deal with that in terms of a net zero energy approach? Would you amortize the embodied carbon energy use over the life of the building, like 70 years or whatever it is? How would you figure that into your equations? Have you figured that into your equations previously? Do you intend to figure that into your equations in the future?
Yeah, I know we've looked at, building life cycles, which gets at some of those questions.
Dave.
Come on up.
Yeah.
I have another way of looking at it, but I want David to talk about this specific thing.
On our recent projects, at least the ones I've been involved in, we haven't gone all the way back to existing buildings. So we haven't looked at embodied carbon on a holistic scale. But if that's important to this community, we have the capability of doing that with our consultants. And we can really try to, obviously, when we're putting together our specifications and thinking about how to build the building, we can actually skew towards reducing embodied carbon. We've done that a little bit with concrete, for example. We typically will specify green concrete, which has less, traditional materials that require a lot of embodied energy. There's some talk about mass timber framing, for example, as an alternative structural system. We'd be happy to look at that. That not only has embodied carbon benefits, but also could have architectural design and aesthetic benefits as well. So we'll look at all those things. if the decarbonization and embodied energy is important to this community, we can certainly consider that.
Well, if you're going to be truly net zero on energy use, you must include it. I mean, there's no option. If we were building this in Europe, for example, you'd be required by law to include it and to do a carbon offsets. You'd have to plant 1 million trees or something like that.
Yeah.
We don't have that in the United States at the moment.
Correct.
We may in the future, but in Europe you would be
you'd be
required to do that. And in Europe there would be a veto of doing what we're doing if you didn't incorporate those kind of issues. You just wouldn't be able to build the building. The law would not allow you.
Yep.
I just want to make sure that you are sensitized to those issues, that they are probably important to a community like Reading. I don't know. We haven't really explored this. We've only explored this in our committee very briefly, but it is a new feature of construction which I think we all need to be cognizant of.
Absolutely.
I know that our Thornton Tomasetti, our energy consultant, she has talked about projects where he's starting to incorporate embodied carbon into the calculation, the overall calculation. I know that sounds like almost like a overly pragmatic approach, but to think of it, not just think of it like, okay, we have the first time investment, we have the long term, what are the years it gets paid off, blah, 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 for energy. But to actually put that into the equation starts to give you other ways to look at your decision-making process and which one is the best thing to choose. And we can do that if you request. I mean, actually, when somebody brings up something like this, I get excited because it means we get to try something new. And if we keep on doing the right thing like that, we'll do it. So you brought it up. I did want to say something though. When it comes to net zero, when we talk about net zero, the proper thing that we should be saying always is net zero energy ready. Because almost none of these buildings that are being built where they like to say, oh, we're net zero, they're not net zero yet. They're only net zero once they put on enough renewables to pay for it. Or they're net zero because we've made it purely electric and we have an electric company who subsidizes it and we said, oh, look, we're creating all the energy that we need and we're not using any carbon. We do know that if you support this, and it sounds like you will, we will make a zero carbon output building, when it gets built. Not the embodied carbon, but the carbon that it won't make carbon. It'll be no fossil fuels. But there's a couple other funny things what we're going to come into. For example, that one-story building you have, I don't know what its energy use intensity is, but I bet it's 75, 100, 120, I bet it's just awful. And it's probably not as bad as some 60s or 50s, buildings, but it's really, really difficult to take an existing building and to make it that new lined refrigerator box that holds in the energy and does the passive house kind of thing in an existing building. And that is often the biggest issue when you start to balance energy usage and using existing buildings. So the existing building, great for embodied carbon, it's already been processed, there it is. But will it hold up in with your EUI over many, many years? That's the kind of thing that'll be very interesting to balance and to compare. Does that make sense? Am I saying the right things? Because an existing building is really hard to make. It's not been constructed the way that our building will be today. Over the last 15 years, it's completely different than it was when I built buildings 25 years ago. So I'm just bringing that up as there's a real balancing fact.
Possibly, yes.
There's a real balancing act.
There is a dream that when energy becomes so inexpensive,
right?
When we have all this solar and stuff like this, that insulation will not be necessary because it's too expensive to put in the building. That we can do away with insulation because energy is nothing. Like nuclear. When I'm old. I've been through the nuclear thing.
Right.
Nuclear energy was going to be too cheap to meter. Right. We would have nuclear energy and they wouldn't. So it's a pipe dream,
But it's your
Fusion.
pipe dream.
it's not my pipe dream. I'm more realistic about things. No,
Well,
it's not gonna happen.
let me just say, we're very realistic, but by putting in this piece into the formula, it just gives us another thing to look out over the future and see what's the right balance of all these things.
So Mike wants to jump in here.
If I can, just a couple of things, I think, just to tie into what you said, Lee and David. One is, we want to be on right before the cutting edge. We don't want to be in front of the cutting edge. When I was a contractor years ago, I did a project and they built right next to the electric room, a fuel cell room.
We've heard that before, Mike.
Right? You heard that one.
There's a woman, right?
Yeah, yes. So they wanted to do that. So like, you don't want to be so far in front that you're the guinea pig, right? But at the other thing that Lee brought up was, you mentioned net energy ready. Like when we start talking about this type of stuff, we have to be very careful. I've talked with people before about a net zero energy building. And they say, well, we don't need to be connected to the grid, right? Because we have solar panels. And no, net zero energy doesn't mean you're always powering yourself. Sometimes at your peak times, you still need the power coming in from the grid. And in your off-peak times, you're selling it back. That means that you're going to have some cost there as well, right? Because you sell it back at the cost of the energy, not the transmission and all that other part. And you're taking it in with the transmission and things. So when we're talking in this group, people here probably understand that already. But as we're talking with the community, as we're talking with other people, we want to be very careful with the words that we use and what we're talking about embodied carbon versus carbon output, talking about net zero energy versus net zero cost, all those kind of things. So I just think it's a very good topic here. And I think as we get into all those options, you guys showed us 3 different options tonight. There's going to be lots of options that might have reduced carbon or might have reduced energy, might have both, might have neither. And it gives you the ability to look at them and understand what each option offers and let you make the right decision going forward.
Yeah, question for RMLD. According to the presentation, there is a commercial solar rebate of $1,200 per kilowatt hour, I guess that is.
Yeah.
Where does that money come from?
That money is,
Tom, do you mind coming up to the podium, please?
I'll let you.
So we do reserve a part of our rate structure to build a fund so that we can fund incentives for energy efficiency.
So the fund
and
comes from the rate, people who
Yes.
pay the rate.
Yes.
So the fund to give a rebate to Killam comes from we Reading taxpayers. So it seems to be it's not a net gain. It's just a transfer of money from what we pay on our electric rates to the Killam school. So I would not consider that to be a benefit.
Well, I mean,
It's a bookkeeping benefit because it appears on the ledger as being
Yeah.
a reduction in cost.
but it also creates benefits.
Okay.
When we install solar in our territory, it helps us reduce
Yeah.
transmission and capacity costs
Yes.
for importing power from outside the territory. So every time we add generation within our service territory, we are reducing the cost to all ratepayers because we don't have to pay National Grid and Eversource to use their transmission system to import power from somewhere else.
Okay.
You know,
Okay, good, thanks.
okay.
I do. Just trying to get a handle, and I'm sitting next to the chair of the finance committee, and I used to serve on the finance committee. How in this process do we start, and here's the question on everyone's mind, how much is this gonna cost? Where in this process does that come out? How do you guys approach that? I imagine it'll be an iterative process.
Money?
Yeah. I'm gonna go get some.
So it is an iterative process and it goes from general to specific. So in the feasibility study, after we've done our background work, by the end of the feasibility study, by the middle of the feasibility study, we will have some square foot kind of design options. So you might see kind of this box that's this big and it's 2 stories and it, it has some kind of shape to it. And this is one design based on all the program and all of that. We have a cost estimator, and you have a cost estimator too.
Correct.
We better not have the same one. We
No.
have PMNC.
Well, then we'll probably have Ann Fogarty.
There you go. So we have the 2 dueling cost estimators, and they will look at these options based on market and all that. And they're actually both really good. We have good ones. And then they come up at first with just square footage kind of costs based on other projects and all that kind of stuff and what we're trying to do. Then you'll start to get a kind of a bracketing of costs. These days, these buildings are costing $500 a square foot, sometimes $600 a square foot. We don't really know. It depends on the building and its shape and its size and its efficiency. And its size is an important factor, because if you had a twice as big building, economy of scale, the actual cost per square foot would be less. You will all of a sudden start to see rise out of that where your cost of construction would be. On top of that, obviously, is soft costs and things like that. That is furnishings and fees and all of that. And what is that, around 25% these around?
Yeah, if you take your construction costs.
Stand next to me, this is
Yes.
a money question.
Yeah, if you take your construction costs, I would say somewhere between 25 to 35%. So you take that, you take it times about 125, 135, that's gonna get you total project costs. Again, it depends on how much FF&E you have, different things of that nature. I think the other part of this that we have to take into account when we're talking money and cost is there's your initial construction cost. And then we used to always say the second part of it is the operational cost. And I think a third part that is actually becoming a major part is the incentives. And especially when we're talking anything with energy and energy reduction, it's the incentives. And we have to be clear and understand, when you talk incentives, we don't say we have a $100 million project and we have $10 million in incentives, so we have a $90 million. No, you have to put up the 100 million, you have to build the project, and then you usually have to show that what you built actually met the design that you intended. And then once you do that, you get the incentives back. Now, sometimes those are tax rebates or tax credits. Sometimes it's an actual check coming to you. But just understand that when you have that incentive, it's good to understand that in long-term, big picture, but it still does mean that that money has to be put up front as part of that initial construction value.
And by the end of the feasibility study, we'll have looked at a number of options. We'll have priced them again, less square footage, a little more specifically, and understood them to the point where you can see kind of what it might look like a little bit too. At that point, you'll probably pick one. Remember that chart that I showed that had all those things and it had these designs, but then at the end, it actually had a range of costs. Oh, this one was 50 to 62, and this one is this. Oftentimes they do range because it's early on, and you can see what can we focus on. I know that you want to probably incorporate pre-K into this. Putting it into the building and integrating into the building is going to be the most cost-effective way to build a pre-K, because you have we're building a building, but you have all the associated, heating and all those things are going to make it the best thing if you can tell your community or show to your community that investment is worth it. By the end of the feasibility study, you will have a preferred scheme. We'll give it to the MSBA and you'll have to go over that with them. All of schematic design is really us looking at that preferred scheme and focusing and detailing and making sure that it gets to a place where at the end of that, we have a price that is more detailed, because you have to live with that price. You take that as your bond with this guy's help, and you go out to the community and they vote on that. After it passes, because I'm that kind of guy, but after it passes, we have to really stick to that cost. We have these 2 cost estimators, and they each come up with an estimate, and then we bring them into a room every single time we estimate, and we fight it out. Cause they like realize that, oh, I missed that, I did that, and they work pretty well together, and that's called reconciliation. It seems to work pretty well.
It does, and I think the two that we mentioned are probably the most experienced with the MSBA.
Yeah.
The last thing I'll say as far as cost goes that kind of will factor into your decision-making is, like Lee said, we're gonna start with dozens of options, right? And we're gonna narrow it down to
Dozens?
maybe a half a dozen, and we're gonna price those half a dozen. And then we're gonna have that preferred schematic. We're gonna have costs associated with that, but there's kind of two costs there even. There's the project cost, but then there's the cost to the district. And that's where we have reimbursables. We have that percentage that the MSBA is gonna reimburse. There's certain caps, there's certain requirements, and we're gonna have to take a look at that because different schemes may have different flexibilities. Having the pre-K in there might make a little bit more space of ineligible space. Not having it would be a little bit less. If we have a scheme where we have an extra large gym, you might have more ineligible square footage or things like that. So we have to go through all those options, and that's gonna be part of the discussion. It's not only what is the project cost, but what is your portion of that project cost? Because again, that's gonna be coming down to your vote and your understanding of that. And you can have two different projects that are both $100 million projects, but one might have all of it eligible, and one of them might only have 80% of it eligible or something like that. So that's another fine point that we have to make sure that everybody understands and is clear with.
Does it answer your question, all this talking, or is this what you wanted to understand? Because we're not gonna tell you how much it costs tonight, because we don't actually know.
Right.
That's fair.
I think it does, and from a planning perspective, because there are other projects we're looking at, it's and how we're gonna present this to the community, so yes, this is super helpful, thank you.
Okay.
I think what we can start probably, I won't say, I can't give you an exact date, but once we start having some of these planning sessions, start understanding it, start getting a general idea of how many square feet we have, we can get that square footage, we can put some numbers to it to give us an initial range.
I mean,
And we can do that, I won't say within a month, but within the month or two, we'll be able to have a general idea of where we're heading.
There's a standard program for 455 students for an elementary school from the MSBA that mostly they will reimburse. As we add in pre-K and and do all those kinds of things, it's fairly predictable, what could and might happen with that.
Yeah.
I do wanna also compliment you on one big thing. The money that you put aside for site and environmental testing and survey and soils and all that kind of stuff, doing that now, right up front, thank you. All my consultants are very happy about that. And this is important for money because it's going to help define, if we know where the ledge is and all that kind of stuff right up front, it's going to help us define how much things really cost and there's less uncertainty. So whoever pushed for that, thank you. Appreciate it. Good point.
Thanks very much.
Yeah, it was awesome.
Very informative, thank you.
So we are going to take a vote. Have a motion?
Yeah, we have a motion that's a little different than the one that was in the packet. The motion would be vote to recommend LaVallee Bressinger as our Killam School Building Designer of Choice per the recommendation of the MSBA Designer Panel.
Second.
Any discussion? We'll take a vote. All those in favor, you can just do a show of hands. All those opposed? And we pass. 7-0. Thank you, everybody.
Congratulations.
Great, thank you, everyone. So we will have a quick discussion, maybe not a too thorough discussion on the project website.
Sure.
Right, we had talked before about 3 potential options, and we just asked Mike and Suzanne to come back if they had any additional information on it.
Sure, so we did follow back after our last meeting. We had talked with some PR firms before, and we had told you that they're kind of giving us a menu that we can select from. And I think most of them thought we would maybe select a little bit more than just one option. So we're reaching out to some other people, basically, some people that are more specific to web design than a full PR option. So we still may get a price from one or two of those PR firms, but they kind of indicated that their price might not be as desirable as somebody who does just web design. So I think we're reaching out to some people we know. If there's anybody here knows that somebody in town that does it, that you think might be interested in it, we'd certainly give them the opportunity. We can have a discussion with them, something like that. But we're hoping that by the time we have our next meeting, that we'll have a little bit more defined information for you, maybe some pricing, that type of thing.
So we're really just looking for someone to put a website together with input from the designer, from
Yeah.
OPM, just so we can get this through to our vote.
Yeah, so I think the thought here would be, they would give us a certain amount of hours. They say, hey, it's gonna take 20 hours to do the initial setup, or something to that effect, or 40 hours, whatever. I don't know how many hours it really, but they're gonna take a certain amount of hours to set it up, and that would be, the first cost. And then I think what we're asking them to do is provide us a cost to maintain that. And that cost, we're actually asking them if it's, 2 hours a week, or if it's a day a week. Give us a couple of options that we can bring back to you, and then you folks can tell us, yes, I think 1 day a month is good enough. That's 2 hours a week. Or no, we think we're gonna be doing a lot of updates and we want 1 day a week, or maybe it's 4 hours a week. So we can have that adjustment, and what we can do is we can work with them with the cost not to exceed, and we can kind of monitor it for a while. And if we're going under, we'll come back to you and let you know we're coming under, and we'll probably save some money in the end. If we're going over because we're doing a lot of updates and everything like that, we can let you know that and let you know, hey, do we want to keep at that level? Do we want to go higher? Do we want to go a little lower? And we can kind of maintain it from that perspective. But I think as we get the website up, LBA is going to have a lot of renderings and a lot of those options and stuff like that. That's going to go onto the website. So they'll be able to give us that in a format that is easily uploadable. We're going to be having the meeting minutes from here. We're going to be having cost estimates. We might have presentations that we've done with the educators, with the community, things like that. Those can go on there as well. So it'll be really a repository of all the information from the project. So anybody can go there at any time. And we can even start with, the packages you sent out for us to get our project, our RFS and the RFS we did for the design team as well. We can really put whatever you want on there.
Can I ask a quick question, Carl? So on that, just the thought on the renderings, and I worry about that to some degree. Like, have you seen experience-wise that putting on renderings early, does that help, or because I worry about like people getting on early and saying, oh, it's already designed, before and not realizing the process versus waiting to a certain point and then having it on. I just thinking about it from that perspective.
You are so right, and that's why we're not going to put things on there until they're ready to be put on there. It really is about having, like, your website might say educational visioning, and you click on that as a tab, and you see all the information about educational visioning and maybe even a presentation, things like that. There's no pictures yet. They're not gonna, people, and when we say renderings, I think what Mike might be saying right now is early on, you might see these little boxes and then they become little floor plans of things, but we will stay, even though we love to design, but you know what? We've learned not to put things out there that aren't ready. So we have to show discipline, and put things out there in a certain stage. People might jump on and just want to look at all the sustainability presentations and stuff. And that's what we're going to do. That's how we're going to help you.
Yeah, and I think early on, if we have a rendering of sort, it might be of a classroom, say, not the whole building. It's little snippets. Here's what we see in a kitchen, a cafeteria with a serving line, or different options, stuff like that.
See those drawings that you had up there that Scott did? That might be the end of feasibility study, and that's about as far as we've gone at the end of feasibility study. So you can pick which option you want to go forward with. but I don't think those were too scary. And we're purposely not showing you crazy renderings here. This is what it's gonna look like. Here we profess that all we wanna do is listen to the community and make a building that's just for you, and we're gonna show up not knowing you and show you what it's gonna look like? That's nuts.
I think that ends up being the concern, is that once there's a
Exactly.
rendering, there's no listening, and then you start to erode your credibility. And I think that's.
By the time we get to schematic design and you've picked an option, then we start to say materials and what's it look like and how's it feel in the scale. That's when we'll get into it. No jump in the gun.
I think a lot of times the other thing is, in my experience working with LBA, they like to show something in a presentation to get a reaction, right? It's either you like it or you don't like it, but if I just say, well, what would you like? And then don't show you anything, you might not know what you like. But if we show you something, you can look at it and say, oh yeah, I love that, or no, I hate that. You know, like it gives you that ability to kind of help direct them which way to go.
It's a conversation.
Yeah, and I think it would be just curious for us as we kind of go through this to leverage how other communities have engaged them, you know, like how that engagement has worked as far as when they've seen stuff, what, you know, like what the reaction is and how, you know, like you want to build towards something versus having it be kind of like a, you know, like kind of a one-stop. You know, I think we want to build momentum, you know, towards the vote, and I think that's what that coordination is what I'm, you know, kind of most interested in.
That is the right word, momentum. And we do it by meeting with people from the very start, being really transparent. I know people use the word transparent, but to me it just means telling the truth and telling you stuff right away. There's nothing to hide. We want comments. We want people to be involved even in the beginning. So our first community meeting, we want to somehow advertise it for people to come or to be involved. Those people, even the ones who say, I don't want a school, I don't believe in it. My job, I love this, is to somehow work with them until they say, oh, yeah, okay, like to change, to flip them. And sometimes it's one person at a time. If we do it like you're saying, build up momentum, by the time you get to the vote, it's a wave. But if you just kind of, you know, so we wanted to start really quick and fast with that. You believe in that, right?
It's the, I think, hearing from Ed, and I think we've all kind of expressed it in the past of, we know where we wanna get to, but we're eager to get there, so you guys are just getting on board and we're already like waiting for you to tell us what the schedule is, so we can.
Yeah, we're caged animals here.
Well, so I'm gonna give you a lesson in Zen, right? Take a deep breath, realize that this is iterative and it's purposefully in a certain order. It's in order for a reason. And it's slowed down a little bit to bring people along. I have seen things fail when they keep it hidden, and all of a sudden they drop a building on them and say, here's your building, and people are like, what? Where'd that come from? And then they get mad. And I would be mad too if that was my neighborhood. So our job is to bring people along all together with us. Plus, it makes us change, because what the idea of what I think your building should be right now is completely wrong. And you have to teach me that. I believe that.
And we, just so you know, Lee actually reached out to us already, Jenny and Lee actually, about setting up a schedule review. So we're actually gonna be meeting tomorrow afternoon to kind of take that schedule that we gave you already once and take a look at it. And it's not gonna be final tomorrow either, but we wanna get their input from it. And then after we have the first couple meetings and start to understand where we are, I think we said at the very beginning, we'll move as fast or as slow as you want, to a degree, right? There's only so fast we can go, especially with the MSBA process. But we're gonna be making some adjustments to that schedule, and I would say, hopefully, within a month or so, we'll be making some more adjustments, and at that point, we'll have what we could call the baseline schedule. That's kind of what we're going with from there forward, what we can measure against, so that we can see where we are and how we're doing. Doesn't mean it's not gonna change. Schedules, you know, a schedule isn't done until the project's done, because there's always some tweaks here and there, but we wanna try and keep that general flow of the schedule in understanding. And as we get that detail in there, we're getting, in this first phase, we're not talking about meeting with the HJs, But when we get into the next phase, the authorities having jurisdiction, meeting with the building department, meeting with the fire department. But what we're gonna see in this is after we get all the details lined up, we're gonna see, oh, that's when we wanna have the first community meeting. Oh, that's when we wanna have the second community. And we'll put them right into the schedule and we'll assign dates. So we'll know well in advance when we're gonna start having those and you can start advertising them, again, to get everybody out there so people can't say, oh, I didn't know.
Yeah, I think that's, Carl, I think that's the key for us is we want to leverage your collective experience as far as in how to be most successful in being transparent in reaching out to the community. There's a lot of excitement, I think, for us in kind of pursuing this project and to be where we're at now. And I think we want that to grow. And we want to leverage your experience and
Embrace this exploratory part where you're learning about education, you're learning about the buildings. Embrace it for a little while. Give yourself permission not to be done. And then we can go through that. That's what I've had to do with myself, and then just to show how pushy I am, when's our next SBC meeting?
We're gonna talk about it. We're gonna talk about it soon.
Yeah.
Right, when's our next meeting? When is, our next meeting with the executive staff here? And giving you guys a little bit of time. My proposal, and you guys can, shoot it down.
Can I just make one comment about the website?
Yeah, go ahead.
The only thing I wanted to say is, and this is for the folks watching at home, is we have an IT department that is lean and mean. We do not have these resources, and this is absolutely critical that we are asking the project, and I've been listening and hearing this since back to the owner's project manager presentations and through your presentations. This is an area that we do not have the resources to effectively communicate to the community. So I don't know if you guys know, our IT department's like 3 people. We don't, so this is so important.
Well, there will be a couple people who step up, who are in your community or friends of this board.
Okay.
Who are in marketing or in communications and wanna help.
Okay.
And you will need volunteers and support people. They could be part of your school, they could be part of your group, or they could just be a parent or something. These people really do exist, and if you can get 1 or 2 of them, and they're powerful people, they will help us succeed.
We got it to do.
Excellent.
Thank you. Oh, Tom,
I've heard.
come on up, Tom, please. Yeah.
Thank you, Carla. Tom Olala with Reading Lake. I've heard rumors that there's a Swampscott Elementary School that's could be very similar to what we want to end up with. So my question is it allowable or appropriate at some point for us to tour that school or talk to the Swampscott people who developed it and have gone through this process, and how does that fit into this process?
So if I can elaborate on that, 2 things. First and foremost is we're gonna tour probably not just Swampscott, but a lot of other schools. I think that that's a good opportunity for the people here, for the educators, to actually see what other communities are doing and say, hey, I like that, I don't like that. Again, take the best of it all to make your project as good as it can be. Now, specific to Swampscott, I actually had reached out to Pam Angelakis, she's the superintendent of schools over there, just recently, and I actually told her that, I said, I don't know if this group is going to want to, but I'm going to want to personally. And she said that she would welcome a tour. So now that we have LBA, they can maybe be the liaison to coordinate that. But I think it would be great to get out there. I think David, did you say that the building's gonna be enclosed soon, and maybe like late spring might be a good time to kind of get out there or something like that? Like we'll start to be able to see classrooms and.
Yeah, the mock-up classroom is progressing right now.
Yeah.
So I would say probably even mid-January, late January might be an opportunity.
I will also say that Mike Parolo, as part of his educational visioning process, will take people on tours of other elementary schools that he knows around here
So you get to see what is the latest and the greatest there as well. It's not necessarily the energy thing, but which you were talking about, but seeing those schools, it is eye-opening to see something that's new and what's going on. Very helpful to, we should all go.
Although, to get back to the previous discussion, we don't wanna look at Swampscott and say, oh yeah, build that, exactly that.
No.
We don't wanna jump to that.
No, it's not that. You talked about energy. So we have the same team, the same energy and David and the mechanical, the same team that worked through that. And we didn't calculate embodied carbon. So basically we have another thing to think about, which is good because they were getting lackadaisical and this will get them. No, I hate to see people get bored.
No. So if there's other schools that anybody here says, oh, I know of a school in whatever town, please let us know. We can reach out. We can talk to the other OPMs, the other designers. Between us, we work with a lot of different people, so we have some connections there. Or we might be able to reach out to the superintendent there or something like that. But I know, what was it, Marlborough? Was that one of the ones that we?
Marblehead?
No, we went to Marblehead.
Marblehead was one that Swampscott went to, and they really liked. That was a newer one. That we took some of the lessons learned from them, right? You know, that's another thing that we do is, you know, what did you have as a problem during construction, and you know, let us know what your problem was so we don't have the same problem, that kind of thing.
With their own problems, right?
Yeah, we'll find our own problems.
Yeah, it's not just about, I mean, we've done some schools, but I like to see everybody's schools. And I love to watch people walk around and say, what's that? And they go, oh, I like that. And then we know what to do. We get kind of an idea of who you are by what your taste is. Makes sense.
Super, thank you. Moving on, we're gonna do a motion. Karen? The 10:30 meeting minutes.
Okay, motion to approve meeting minutes of the Killam School Building Committee from 10/30/23.
Second.
Second, any discussion? Ready for a vote? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Passes 7-0. Thank you. So now we get to future agenda items and meeting dates. So my thought was that we would give the designer a little bit of time through the end of December. And then we would start with our executive meetings and then get into our Killam meetings in January. And we don't have to decide this right now, we can talk about it. It was just my initial.
I keep looking up at Ruth Bader, staring down, thinking we better do a good job.
That's right. She's got
There's something
her
about
eyes
her
on
that makes
you.
me wanna do.
Keeps everyone on task.
Yeah.
She really, her eyes are like following me. So let me say that, so we're really gonna focus on the schedule, but the schedule is gonna be like, hey, we have to start visioning and we have to start this. Are there people even during the next couple of weeks, if we wanted to, with Mike, to talk to a couple of you,
Absolutely.
who is kind of the core subgroup that we can ask like, hey, there's Tom who's on, right? He's going to be essential to us setting up the educational parts of things.
Yep.
So just want to make sure that we have an open communication so we can set up and get these things moving so that in the very beginning of January, we're actually doing work.
Yep, absolutely. We have a teacher, Ellen McGinty, and we have our school principal also. And we will put whomever you need in front of you. Let's put it that way.
All right, that's good. We want to hit the ground running, right, Mike?
And we're gonna start probably with the educational visioning and the educational.
Visioning, the facility assessment, and maybe even a survey. Might as well do that before it snows too much.
Yeah.
Good. I'm excited about getting started the right way.
So if we're doing that, we're gonna be doing various meetings when do you think you would be ready to have something to report back to this, like to this group that said, hey, we've had, 6 meetings in the last month and here's some information for you, or?
I think we'll know when we do that schedule by those little pieces. We'll know like what the step is and then when we've come back. We still should meet and we'll give you progress every time. And then we'll start to get into that rhythm of showing you the products.
This group typically meets the third Monday of every month.
Okay.
The third Monday, is in 2 weeks for December. So if you're going into January 15th, is that a good target for this group? And we can set it tentatively and then confirm, knowing we'll have other meetings before
You
then,
mean the 18th?
January,
What about December? No December. Everybody's going.
unless you'd like to.
Well, by that point, in a couple of weeks, we will have a good schedule. Now, but we don't have to share it to you. We can send it to you
Okay,
and say, this is our plan, and then we can start hitting separate people, right, Mike?
Absolutely.
I don't wanna,
okay.
but if you send out invites for every third Monday, and then we'll use that in our schedule, but then we'll start inserting as we get product.
And then when you need additional meetings,
Yeah.
we'll slide those in as well.
And I appreciate everyone's time. This is a big commitment, but it's important.
So you'll get us a schedule, we'll send it out, Fidel can send it out to the whole committee. And so we'll plan on our next formal meeting here on January 15th.
Sounds good.
And then we would like to meet with you with at least a
Although
small.
that-
Go ahead, Tom.
I noticed that's a holiday. It's
Martin Luther
Martin
King.
Luther King Jr. Day.
Oh, thank you.
You can have that one, let me see, the 15th. If you want, you can have that one a week earlier, actually, just the 8th, just to keep us like moving.
Is that good?
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you. So January 8th. And then we will see if we can also get a smaller group
Yeah.
of us together, just to do some initial planning, that would be great.
The other thing we might want to think about either at that meeting or maybe the following meeting is, I think Lee mentioned some subcommittees like sustainability subcommittee, things like that, start to think about who might want to be on those committees and so that because we're gonna be meeting with them as well, right? I mean,
Yeah.
we're talking about starting with the facilities assessment and the educational program, but all those other things are gonna kind of fall in right behind, whether it's traffic or things like that, or the community engagement. When are we gonna start having meetings and bringing the community in, that kind of thing. So I don't know that it has to be done the 8th of January, but certainly by the next meeting.
If we can, if you could get us a list of the subcommittees, if we want to call it that, that there are, and we can send it out to this committee to say who's interested
That'd be
in
nice
it,
to
and then we
socialize.
can,
Yep, that would be great to socialize ahead of time, so
Yeah,
we would know
so
about it.
people can see it, they can just let, me know, I'm interested in this, and then we can kind of plug people in. It never hurts to have too many people if they have to be on it, but.
Yeah, and it's so important to have people on this committee as the representative to that other group. Sustainability, you might be on, like to report back so that it's not just us saying it, but somebody on your committee saying, this is what we did.
Sure.
In the know.
Yeah, not only the subcommittee, so it's not just, it sounds like it's not just a subcommittee of us.
No.
It's a subcommittee of, there's a sub of us that are part of another another group that's
I
gonna
think
have
so.
other
Yeah,
committee
Mike,
members.
is there a name of that is that a public group or is that like a public, or is that something that can meet without public access?
So that's what I was just gonna say, is one of the questions I'm gonna have for you is we can come up with a list of all the different items that we want to talk about. But then it's gonna be up to you folks whether you wanna make a formal subcommittee of that, or if we're just gonna say, Karen's gonna be working with the people about the sustainability, or, different things. Tom is gonna be working when we talk about education, so you don't have to make formal subcommittees. You can, typically what we would recommend is if that subcommittee doesn't have power to make decisions, then you don't have to do the public meeting process. It doesn't mean we can't make it a public meeting, but as long as they're not making decisions, and as long as they're coming back and reporting to you and you're making the decisions in a public meeting, then that's the way we would recommend doing it. But, you know, I've been with districts that have a finance subcommittee. Most don't, but some do. You know, sustainability is certainly one that we typically see, you know, educational programming. But again, whether it's a formal subcommittee or we just say, hey, whenever we have a meeting on sustainability, these are the 10 people that get invited. Or whenever we have an educational meeting, these are the people that get invited. And, you know, we can work that through with you.
It sounds more like a working group to me.
That's exactly right.
And then they make a recommendation that brings it back to this committee.
Because it always does, it is transparent, because it always comes back to here, if you say, this is what the working group came up with, we show it, and everybody knows. So there's no,
No
it's
back of
all,
house.
it's all upfront.
Sound good?
Perfect, yeah, sounds great.
Super. Great.
You need a motion?
Yep.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor? All those opposed? 7-0. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Good night.
Have a good one.